Yo, so guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to, it says top 10. I'm just going to have it as 10 people found not guilty after serving life sentences. I find it weird when it's titled top 10 because it's not necessarily a good, I don't know, it's not necessarily a good thing, is it? It's actually quite, imagine this, like it's actually quite, it's a terrible situation. Imagine being one of these people and you've served a life sentence and then you're found not guilty. That's one of those things that I think, like, mentally, the people who deal with this and that we're going to find out who dealt with this situation, I can't imagine how it would have messed them up. Oh, mate, that would be such... That's probably the worst possible thing, or one of the worst possible things that can happen to someone. That sounds like a very obvious thing to say, but I just cannot fathom how that would make someone feel. But I guess we're going to see people's reactions to it, and... I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you're going to enjoy, obviously, as much as you can. Links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see extra reactions of mine. They get blocked on YouTube. Same for my Instagram and my Twitter if you want to follow me on those. But let's just jump into this, man. Some happy music as well before.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Charlie here, and today we're going to be looking at 10 people found not guilty after serving life sentences. If you do a really serious crime, you will get a life sentence in prison. This is given after people are found guilty for doing their crimes. But many people are wrongly found guilty every single year. Who knows how many people who didn't do a crime will spend their entire life behind bars for no reason? Well, here are some true stories of people found not guilty after spending a lifetime in jail. Some of these are so crazy and will really make you question our justice system. Before we get into it, why not subscribe and press the notification bell too? Coming in at number 10, we have Lawrence McKinney. Lawrence McKinney is now 60 years old and comes from Memphis, Tennessee. In 1978, he was wrongfully convicted of stealing a lady's TV. According to the prosecution, he also did unspeakable things to the lady. And for this, he was sentenced to 115 years in prison. 15 years for taking the TV and 100 years for the other things. So, he was expected to spend his entire lifetime behind bars.
15 years for taking a TV? Alone. Obviously, it's not a good thing you're stealing, but 15 years for taking a TV sounds kind of excessive. Unless they sort of had that with the idea that what else he done was just so bad that we're just going to be like, you know what, F it, we're going to make it even worse, your time here even worse, I don't know. But that sounds kind of excessive, but again, I don't know the details.
But 31 years later in 2009, new DNA evidence came about. The stunning DNA evidence found Lawrence was not even on the scene. He was released in July of 2009 after 31...
Imagine that anger, just your life's been stolen from you. Your life has literally been taken from you. Imagine how that would make you feel,
1 years behind bars. And as compensation after he was released, he was given only $75. That's right, they took away 31 years of his life for no reason and then gave him $75 to say sorry. At the time he said he was happy he was released, but he says he has no life. His entire life was taken away. Now his lawyer is fighting for him to get $1 million compensation. But I think even $1...
Yeah, I'd argue that's not even enough.
...is not enough for 31 years in prison for no reason. And I can't believe they tried to give him $71.
Nothing's gonna ever make up for it. That's just...
Then told him to just leave after taking away 31 years of his life. This is really one of the most terrible stories I've ever heard. And I hope Lawrence does get a lot more money in the future, but nothing can give him his life back.
That's unreal, man.
Next up is Craig Coley. This one took place in California around 40 years ago. In 1978, Craig Coley was accused of taking 2 lives. Those being his 24-year-old girlfriend, Wanda Witch, and also Simi Valley, her 4-year-old son. But in 2018, nearly 40 years later, Craig was acquitted. He was freed after it turned out the district attorney at the time cited false evidence. Now, unlike Lawrence McKinney of before, he was given a more decent compensation. He was given $140 for each day he was in prison. But that's still not very good, seeing as he said every day was a living nightmare. Also, he's now 70 years old and he went in when he was only 30. This means they've pretty much taken his entire life away, and he'll likely spend more of his life behind bars than free. In total, his compensation was around $2 million. But he spent a ridiculous 14,000 days behind bars. He says money nor anything can make up that time lost. And it makes you think how many other people are behind bars for no good reason right now.
False evidence.
Next up is Wilbert Jones. Wilbert Jones was sentenced to life in prison in Louisiana in 1971. He apparently kidnapped and did terrible things to a nurse. He was only 19 years old when he was arrested and given life in jail. And the crazy thing is,
He was younger than me.
The only evidence against him was a police lineup. WILBERT was simply picked out of a police lineup by the nurse. But it turns out the nurse was incorrect and WILBERT had nothing to do with it. At the time, she actually told officers the person who did that to her was actually way taller and had a different voice. But the officers did not care and very controversially sent him to life in prison. The case was very controversial by his family, who says he definitely did not do this. And after they partnered up with the New Orleans Innocent Project, he was found not guilty. He hugged his lawyers and cried as he was finally released out of jail after 50 years.
50?
He's now 65 and is said to be very frail and aging. The nurse he apparently did this to actually passed away in 2008, and the nurse's late husband actually said that he agrees that WILBERT should have been released. Both the nurse and Tim did not agree WILBERT really did it, but it seems some corruption was taking place and the police wanted to put WILBERT away forever. Luckily he's out now, but he's already had his entire life taken away.
19,
Next up is KIRSTIN LOBATO.
He's 19 when he's taken and he's out at 65. That's just literally every like you've started your life before you're 19, you're sort of getting to grips with being an adult. 65, you're sort of chilling out now, you're sort of turning down from life, like you're sort of be able to retire, all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, wow, how is...
On the 8th of July 2001, a girl named KIRSTIN LOBATO, who was only 18, was sentenced to life behind bars. In a Las Vegas, Nevada court, she was sentenced to 100 years in prison. They'd claimed that she'd taken the life of an innocent person. That is because they'd found a man who was not alive. Days before this, KIRSTIN was jumped by a similar looking guy at a motel. She was able to defend herself with a knife and the man ran off. That's the last KIRSTIN saw of it, and she didn't report it to the police. However, she did tell her friends, and one of her friends reported this to the police. They then assumed that the person that she defended herself from was the person who was not alive. And also because she was not sober at the time, they got her to wrongfully confess to what she did. This was the only evidence against her and they didn't have any other key evidence. But after she spent 16 years in prison saying she didn't do it, she was finally found not guilty. It turned out that the guy who she defended herself from had come forward, and the person the police found who was not alive was a totally unrelated thing. KIRSTIN simply defended herself and had nothing to do with taking anyone's life. But sadly it was too late, as she'd already spent 16 years in jail. The crazy thing is KIRSTIN had an alibi the entire time, but they didn't believe it. Luckily now she's out and is a free woman. And also because she was only 18 by the time she was sent to prison, she has a whole long life to live. She is...
I mean, yeah, obviously that's better than the last one, but still, that's just nuts. She's got an alibi and they're like, they don't believe it. What? I mean, again, I don't know the details, but that's just mental.
Nearly 40 now, and they did take away a lot of years of her life. But she didn't have it as bad as some other people on this list.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, imagine how scary it would be at 18 being sentenced to life in prison for something you never did. Next up is KWAME AJAMU. This one took place in Ohio, USA in 1975. When this man was only 29 years old, he was sentenced to life in prison. Apparently he'd taken the life of a salesman, but this was not the case. There was a witness statement saying he was there when it happened, but it turned out to be a lie. He was then convinced to testify as they said he's gonna go to jail forever anyway. He spent a crazy 27 years in prison for doing nothing. Under Ohio law, the wrongfully convicted earned $40,000 per year they were in jail. And seeing as he was behind bars for 27 years, that means he gets $1.1 million. But nothing can buy back that much time, and they really did ruin his life. He was seen bursting into tears when he was finally found not guilty of all charges. He said he was so happy this battle has come to an end, and he hugged his wife and the judge. I'm not sure how I'd feel if I was him. Happy, sad, or angry. Probably a mix of all three. Next up is Ricky Jackson. When Ricky Jackson was just 18, he was sentenced to life in Ohio. He actually joined the Marines at 18, but had to leave as he had a bulky back. Soon after he returned home, Harold Franks had his life taken and they blamed Ricky Jackson. Apparently someone went into his money order store, stole $400, took his life and then fled. They didn't have any good evidence against Jackson. All they had was a statement from a local paperboy who was 12 years old who said he saw Jackson. The jury accepted this 12-year-old's account and Jackson was sentenced to life in jail. At first he was even sent to the electric chair, but luckily 2 years later the sentence was reduced to life. Finally in 2017 all charges against him were dropped. It was found there was no evidence and that he didn't do any crimes. It's absolutely terrible. They took 40 years of his life away for no good reason. He says he's fine.
40 years based off a kid doing his paper round, saying whatever. No way,
free and is for once enjoying life. But he says it's scary just how easily people can take your entire life from you.
Real.
And he actually met with the paperboy who put him behind bars, and he says he forgives him. That is such a big thing to do, and I can't imagine forgiving someone for doing that. But Jackson is clearly very strong-willed, and I'm glad he's finally free. Next up is Mark Denny. When Mark Denny was only 17, he was sentenced to life in prison in Brooklyn, New York. Apparently in 1987 he'd robbed someone and done terrible things to them, but after spending 30 years behind bars he was finally let out. He asked many times for DNA testing but was rejected. But luckily the Innocence Project stepped in and they got a DNA test. They found he actually was not responsible for it whatsoever.
And you could have just done it when he asked for the first time.
His defense said Mr. Denny has been waiting for this day for a very long time. And to be honest, that's an understatement as he served 30 years for no reason. Next up is Richard Phillips. In 1971, someone took the life of a man named Gregory Harris. His brother-in-law said he saw Richard Phillips near the scene. They believed the brother-in-law and he was sentenced to life in jail. Richard Phillips didn't do anything.
Is this what we're working off now? Just people's word, and that's it. That's enough to convict someone.
And when he went into jail, he was 27. Now he's...
Thank God for like the current... Obviously, this stuff will still happen to this day, but thank God for like certain things like DNA evidence and all this kind of stuff now. At least we have some sort of higher percentage of not getting this stuff happening. Again, it's still going to be happening because there's corruption and all this kind of stuff. People get things wrong, but... Jeez, imagine being this like done so dirty.
72 and he was only just let out. That's right, he spent 45 years in prison for something he didn't do. The only reason he was let out is because they found the real person who took Gregory's life. It's quite crazy it took them all this time to let this guy out of prison. And if they hadn't have caught the real person behind this, he may have been in prison for his entire life. I'm sure that's the case for many people, which is a really sad thought.
Yeah.
Next up is John
I mean, imagine there's people out there who have probably weren't ever let out and they were not guilty at all, and maybe they were like sentenced for even less or with even less evidence or whatever than some of these, which is crazy to think because half of the or pretty much all of these have no evidence or have the smallest amount of evidence that shouldn't be enough to do any of this. But
when John was only 14, he was sentenced to life
14?
in prison in Brooklyn. Apparently he'd taken the life of an off-duty officer in Brooklyn. But he's now 41 and after 27 years his name was finally cleared. He began crying and hugged his lawyers and the judge in court.
14.
He says he's been battling his entire life to try and get out of jail. And he said to the prosecutors, "I don't deserve all the things you've done to me." And the crazy thing is the prosecutors never even apologized. Bunn and his lawyers said it would be very nice to get an apology as he deserves one. And I think it's terrible that they sent him behind bars for 27 years and then didn't even say sorry. I hope he gets hefty compensation, but nothing can buy back all that time. Check out the...
Me too. I hope he gets all the stuff back and all these people get all the money and stuff that will help them get back to somewhat where they deserve to be. But god damn, I'm 13 years old and this is the reason why I want to be a lawyer. Fun fact, someone who is in prison right now already has a possibility of being innocent. Yeah, there's loads of people that are going to be innocent in prison. Excuse me, 31 years of his life for false allegations. Someone get that poor old man $10 million. 15 years for stealing a TV. Yeah, bro, that sounds nuts. Obviously, maybe it's because it's combined. Yeah, but he got 100 for those other things and 15 for the TV. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, that's wild. But yeah, I mean, that's the reaction. This is wild. If you want more stuff like this, let me know in the comments. I'm down to do more of these videos because they blow my mind. But yeah, that's it. Until next time, like, subscribe. Peace.